History isn't just a collection of facts and events from the past, but a way of analyzing and thinking critically about the world around us. To help teach learners how to think historically, Thomas Andrews and Flannery Burke from Teachers for a New Era popularized the 5 C's of historical thinking, building off of earlier work from historian Sam Weinberg. Andrews and Burke's 5 C's are change over time, context, causality, contingency, and complexity. Let's go through the 5 C's and think about how we can apply them to the topic of the origins of writing. The idea that things change over time is pretty straightforward. Andrews and Burke write that the idea of change over time is perhaps the easiest of the C's to grasp. Let's compare the Narmer palette with the Papyrus of Ani, 2 Egyptian artifacts created almost 2,000 years apart. The Narmer palette contains a handful of early hieroglyphs. Even a non-expert can conclude that the writing in the Papyrus of Ani is far more complex. There's more of it, and it's arranged in columns. Over time, Egyptian writing grew from representing nouns and numbers, like the glyphs that are thought to represent names on the Narmer palette, to writing full texts, complete with grammar and orthography, like on the Papyrus of Ani. History, as a field of study, also changes over time. Historiography is, in simple terms, the history of history. It studies the methodologies of historians. A historiography of Mayan writing, for example, might critically examine the historical interpretations of Mayan texts. Historiography is another way to examine change over time. Historical artifacts and documents must be understood in context. The small number of surviving Mayan manuscripts must be considered in the context of Spanish conquest, the understanding that the conquest of Mexico was both a political and religious endeavor, and the role that the Catholic missionaries played in the destruction of indigenous literatures and historical records. Causality is the 3rd C. Why did things happen the way that they did? Historians must recognize that for any given event, there are usually multiple possible causes. What caused a fully complex system of Chinese writing to appear out of nowhere? A historian's goal should be to develop the most persuasive and logical causal agreement possible, based on the information available. But even historians studying the same source material might not reach a consensus. Contingency asks not why did things go the way they did, but rather what if things had gone differently? While posing counterfactuals might seem like the domain of writers of alternative historical fictions, grappling with contingency is a good way of testing whether a causal argument is sound. It can also help identify gaps in our knowledge of history, such as asking, how might the historical record be different if there had been more women acting as scribes in Mesopotamia? When you hone your ability to consider change over time, context, causality, and contingency, then the complex nature of history becomes clear. Acknowledging historical complexity helps us honor the unique lives and experiences of individuals and helps inoculate us from thinking of cultures or groups of people as monoliths. It helps deter us from accepting theories as fact or accepting a single explanation when multiple factors are at play. Andrews and Burke wrote, "Reveling in complexity rather than shying away from it, historians seek to dispel the power of chronicle, nostalgia, and other traps that obscure our ability to understand the past on its own terms." Whether you are trying to understand what happened yesterday or many millennia ago, The 5 C's are a great basic way to think historically.